You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community. Welcome back. I am your host, Ben Wolf, and I hope that your eyes enjoy, if you're watching this on YouTube, which we recently have started having our episodes on YouTube. I hope your eyeballs enjoy the new backdrop and the new scenery behind me, as well as the new HD setting on my Zoom that we're using to record this because of the new backdrop, which enables that higher resolutions. Hopefully people enjoy the higher resolution and the background. And for those of you who are listening to this just on the audio, please check out the YouTube version as well. And you could see and bask in the enjoyment of my new background. So today's episode is going to be on how business owners can free themselves up from half managing an underperforming sales team with a fractional sales manager. I'm going to be introducing you to this tool to the extent you're not familiar with it already, which is great with our amazing guest today. So with the great value that we share with our guests like the one today, like recently having the author of The Founder's Dilemmas, Noam Wasserman, the Dean of SciSim School of Business, recently having on Kelly Knight, and we're working on some very exciting guests also coming up in the near future. So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that's on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it might be. Subscribe, make sure your notifications are turned to the max. If they don't automatically do that, like on YouTube, where the Big Brother likes to decide which shows that you get to watch and which ones you don't, of the ones that you subscribe to. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and make sure that you have access to this content and this knowledge in the future. And with that, I want to get on to introducing our guest today. She is the owner and outsourced sales manager. She is the owner of Outsourced Sales Management Services, through which she acts as a fractional sales manager virtually anywhere in the world or locally in the Detroit, Michigan area. She is a host of a LinkedIn video interview show called Fractional Service Insights. So you definitely want to look her up on LinkedIn once I do the big reveal on her name. And she has over 25 years of sales management experience. She is also an affiliate of the Sales QB framework for fractional sales leadership. You can find out more about her and what she does on her website, salesmanagementservice.com. That's sales management service is singular, salesmanagementservice.com. And with that, I give you Teresa Renaud. Welcome, Teresa.
Ben, thank you so much. It's awesome to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. And hopefully everybody will, I'll send everybody on my LinkedIn to the interview that I did on your LinkedIn interview show, which is really a perfect synergy between your topic, talking all about fractional service providers, and not even just sales, which would be relevant enough. And obviously what I do is a fractional integrator, or like similar to an outsourced COO for companies that use the entrepreneurial operating system framework, the EOS framework for their business. So appreciate you having me on your show, and hopefully everyone will get to see that shortly before or after they hear what you have to share here. And with that, I want to get on to my first question, which I ask everybody, which is if you could just give us a quick 2-minute background, what's, maybe stuff that's not necessarily on your resume on LinkedIn or whatever, but what do people need to know to understand how you got to be where you are today, where you came from?
Yeah, perfect. So my journey to understanding the value of a sales revenue manager really did start 25 plus years ago. I've been in sales management all my life, and spent 15 awesome years with Cisco Systems, the technology company. I had 4 exciting leadership roles within that time frame, and then decided to take an early buyout and just do something different. I kind of wanted to challenge myself in a different way. It was awesome to be with an amazing company, but took my bucket of money and my husband and said, we're going to do something different. Let's open up our own company. So we went out and we bought a distributorship, and it was a fun ride. We had a great time, learned a lot, except for one thing. Within 3 months, we immediately knew that the company that we had aligned ourselves to was going out of business. They pulled back on all their resources. So I was like, all right, we need to do something else with this game plan real quickly. But you know what? It was great to be able to to take that leap of faith and just jump in and experience for the first time in my life the true entrepreneurial experience. I quickly went back into tech sales management with a much smaller organization than Cisco. And it was like, Houston, we have a problem. Man, this is a different space out here. There's very little process. There's not a whole lot of discipline, and there's no coaching or really sales management. So it was an opportunity to put the wheels back on the car from a experiential perspective, my background that being. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I was able to find Sales QB, a national organization that did produce this framework for small business revenue success, and took, my 25 plus years of sales management, married it with their framework program, and now I'm providing on-site or remote fractional revenue sales management experience for small businesses.
Right. And that's great. And I think what I guess what I'm hoping that people can come away from, and the knowledge that they could really gain, ask myself in every episode and everybody that we bring on, what kind of value can we share that will be something that will be a value add for people. And I'm, just want to preface our conversation with just saying that I guess what I really hope that people will come away with is an understanding of what is this idea of a fractional sales manager. And who is it for, what's the symptoms, and and what does it look like, what does it do for you, so people will have that in their toolbox if that happens to be right for them.
So let me just back up for a second and reiterate that a very common problem that is affecting all small businesses is this concept or notion of a diseconomy of scale. It's hard to afford expert resources when you have smaller teams or a smaller organization. So then fractional service providers actually plug in where that problem is, like the big hole. That problem is their competitive thorn, and the fractional service provider is their competitive weapon. So really what that looks like for me is, turnover is an issue for a lot of different reasons in small business environments, but sales turnover is an obvious, hey, we got a problem. Having a team that isn't managed is a big problem. Having a team that's managed by the owner is still a problem. And there's two types of businesses or business owners out there, and you'll appreciate this coming from the EOS framework, and that is, it's either your techie, who tends to be the integrator implementer, or it's your rock star salesperson, who would be your visionary. And this guy over here doesn't really want anything to do with sales. And this person over here can't ever seem to find anyone as good as themselves. So right there is a good reason why it's not usually very effective for business owners to continue to try and manage sales teams. So any of those, the worst thing of all is to take your rock star salesperson and try to make them a sales manager all at once while carrying a bag. So if any of those situations exist, that's usually a perfect opportunity for a fractional sales manager. But in and above that, fractional sales manager can be a plug-in for an operation or an organization that may already have best practices in place, and you just need to augment some services. Like perhaps you haven't had the ability to take the time to put a proven and repeatable integrated marketing sales operation in place. Well, an outsider could come in and kind of with a new set of filters be able to create and document that process. So it's good for normal sales management and operational fix-up, as well as one-off projects.
Right. And don't you also talk about another scenario where you bring in kind of a lower paid person at a lower price point, and what happens then? Like when people try to bring a lower paid sales manager, or somebody that they think they can afford doesn't have all that experience.
Yeah.
What happens then? What might people recognize in their lives, in their experience?
And that usually is in the form of friends and family that small businesses ends up being a recruiting arm for. So you sort of get locked into, I think that person needs a job, so they must be able to be a sales manager. That rarely happens with any kind of effectiveness towards success as well. So if you have a poor manager, having a fractional expert is usually a whole lot more effective than having somebody that just can't even get the job done.
Right. Well, you know what? I guess I wish you would go a little bit even more in depth in some of those scenarios you just talked about. Like paint a picture, or maybe give us one or two examples or stories from clients or people you know about, where either the owner is like half managing their team while they try to run the business on the side, and the team isn't performing as well as they need. Again, this scenario where you hire someone who's really underqualified, hasn't been there, hasn't done that, or that other example you mentioned of like hiring your sales rock star, and now they're a bad manager and they're not even doing as much sales as they used to be, which is what they're really good at.
Yeah.
So like paint a little bit more of a picture about like what happens in those scenarios, examples, stuff like that.
Sure. So let's go back to the sales, to the owner trying to half manage that team while
Hmm.
also trying to run the organization. So
Right.
typically what a scenario that looks like in that capacity is no formal sales meetings, no accountability because they don't have time to make everybody else accountable.
Yeah.
Usually we have reduced communication snippets. So then there's communication disconnects. So we
Hmm.
have confusion, and we usually don't have, usually what a leader should be doing is setting the direction and the culture. So
Hmm.
when the owner is messing around managing all these other things and trying to sell and trying to do these other things, we don't have a common culture that is um, ready for success. And we have a lot of confusion. We usually have, that's a great example for a lot of high turnover. People just get burned out with the owner flipping stuff over the fence, trying to half manage. We really what needs to happen in that point is if you have a good owner that's a great salesperson, make them the closer. Bring them in
Hmm.
for the big deals, the complex deals. There's a place for that owner to continue to leverage their talent and their skill set, but it really isn't in the area of managing and coaching a team. And that's the same kind of DNA representation that becomes apparent when you take a rock star salesperson that knows how to hunt. And
Hmm.
those are really old school terms that we shouldn't be using anymore in the political correctness arena that we're in. Sales correctness now is more of a leadership style,
Hmm.
married with marketing, and it's still a very hard skill to conquer, but we have that very aggressive salesperson who knows how to go out, do the right things to generate the sales and close them. But they usually have a low appetite for helping others because they're so focused on their own goal. So
Big
that
deals. Yeah.
benevolence doesn't really carry through, in terms of coaching or caring or mentoring. So
Uh-huh.
usually what happens is people are like, I'm out of here. Man, Joe was nice when I didn't have to talk to him and he was just bringing in the numbers and no one was looking at the rest of the numbers. So, that's not a good situation. And then no management. Well, pretty much the inmates are running the asylum, and that business owner should just really hold on because you don't know where this thing is going if everyone's got their own plan or no plan.
Right.
And I mean, you should be able to tell that by the numbers. But here's another thing that happens when you have an underperforming or an undermanaged team. No one's paying attention to the numbers until the COO or the CFO comes in and says a quarter later, what happened? Well, what do you mean what happened? Nobody was managing the numbers like we should be on a weekly basis. We could have
Right.
we could have figured this out like 2.5 months ago.
Right. Now, to make it more concrete, can you give again? I just want people to like see themselves in this. Do you have any stories that you could share? We could move on to the next question if you don't have anything at hand. But like, you have any like stories or examples you could share of people in industry, certain industry, whatever,
Yeah,
in
so
these situations? I'm sure you have a ton. I mean,
well, here's another common situation where I do get brought in as a fractional sales revenue manager to help improve on the operation and then co-share the seat with the owner because that
uh-huh.
owner still doesn't want to give up total control. And there's another story there. But that's okay too, because in that situation, what I'm doing is coaching the owner on how to change the situation. So we've gone from a very undisciplined approach to number one, having a weekly cadence. We have goals. We've changed the culture in terms of establishing a mission statement, a true mission statement with guiding principles that now everybody in the organization is responsible for memorizing. We made everybody memorize it and we repeat it every week, not like it's some weird thing, but it's because it's a part of our DNA. So we've gone from somebody that was losing people because it was very hard to be in this chaotic spot. And here's another thing, because there was this control that this person needed to have over everything, there were too many rules and regulations. It was like, well, you don't have a sales staff here. You have people that you call salespeople that are doing the weirdest things because you want them to, and it's
What do you
not
mean?
productive.
I actually have not come across this. Like, what do you mean by that?
So because there's no trust, or there wasn't any trust, I should say. There are too many I's and T's that needed to be dotted and crossed. So people were just stuck in busy work versus true selling. So we had to back out of that and understand what was necessary and what was possible for moving us past that situation.
Right.
Literally, she wanted an outside sales force, but was nervous about letting people not leave the office.
Interesting. I mean, okay, let's get to what it looks like when a fractional, or any fractional sales leader that somebody brings on board. What does that look at? What does that look like?
Yeah. So what it looks like for us, for me and whoever I'm working with, is, first of all, it starts off with an assessment so that we understand where the gaps are and we have an agreement on where the best practice gaps are, so that it's just not me saying these are what your problems are. Part of what Sales QB does is provides a pretty hefty, robust assessment. So I go in and spend a little bit of time interviewing a number of people, leaders, as well as, I don't care if it's the receptionist, the welcome director, as I like to call receptionists now. We go in, I go understand what their perceptions are, and usually they're a lot. At the end of the day, what the owner tells me is wrong is only half true. There's another side to it. So I put together a plan. We discuss where these gaps are and how we might prioritize working on them together, and then I'm either brought on board for some or all of those solutions, or eventual solutions, or they can do some of these things themselves. I mean, there's enough DIY stuff out of this assessment that it's a standalone product that's really useful. So once we understand what we're going to get focused on, then we get focused on it. And if it's a full team coaching experience, then there's always going to be, what are the goals? Are they right? How do we keep people accountable? What's our weekly cadence? What's our conversation going to be like? And what's the cadence for that? So that owners typically like to be kept in the loop. So we want to make sure we have that. So it's a whole 360 in terms of focus and communication, but it's not just with the team. The other part of, and the beauty of what we do within Sales QB is it's operationally focused. So if there's a gap in lead generation or lead nurture, we figure out how to help with that. So with the perfect thing about for small businesses is you can't have, a great big marketing department. You'll be lucky if you have a good marketing person. And we need to make sure that marketing and sales is really smarketing. And I'm borrowing that from HubSpot. I think they coined that.
I use HubSpot, but I don't know. I didn't come across that term. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So really, that's what it is. Holistically looking at the operation in terms of buyer's journeys change. That gate, that horse left a long time ago. What continues to change is the technology tools. It's all digital now. And a lot of these small business owners, man, they haven't had enough time to stop and figure out. They're still working on getting their second revision of their website done.
Right.
Yeah. So, we got to figure out what operational things got to be fixed up here while we're taking care of, the people over here.
Right.
And one big thing that I noticed with these owners is, this was such a big thing at Cisco. You got to be always interviewing. You got to have a bench. And I don't think they understand the value of that and the criticality of business owners want to make money, save money, and obtain and retain the best and the brightest. How can you have the best and the brightest if you're not always looking for them? So
Huh.
I have to train them on, we need to develop a system for you to always be looking. You need to be selling yourself, the culture, and always be looking, because I guarantee you, we're going to grow and you're going to need that person, but we're also going to have some sort of fallout.
Right.
So did I give you enough examples on what it might look
Yeah,
like?
no, it's good. It's good stuff. What did I want to ask you also was, I think some people might be asking themselves, and really, this is not just a question about fractional sales management. Really, it's a question you could ask for any kind of fractional sales leadership in particular. We're not talking about outsourcing customer service here, or like, your phone, answering messages. How does it work? How can it work to have a leadership level person who's not there full time, or who's even not only, or is perhaps not even not there full time, who's there only virtually, even when they are there? So, and I know you work virtually. I work virtually with some clients, as a fractional integrator. So, how do you explain when people are like, "Well, how can that work? I'm used to having all my other employees, or most of my other employees, are there all the time. How could you manage a sales team when you're not even with them most of the time?" So, what do you tell people when they ask that?
So uh, I don't know, it's just been super easy for me. It's,
Yeah.
you establish trust and credibility right up front. You get buy-in from the leadership team at the beginning, and together you announce to the team, the extended team, and it may not just be the sales team, it really should be the entire organization, depending upon how small or large they are,
Uh huh.
that this is, the new person who's going to be taking over these specific responsibilities. And oftentimes there's, you know, calls that are calls or video meetings that are established outside the normal allotted time frame, to adjust for the normal day-to-day business stuff that comes into play. So we just have to, from a scheduling perspective, I have to be super careful about being flexible, and also set the right expectations of, I'm available for you anytime, but you got to give me a little bit of, I get a 3 hour notice for the callback or whatever. So I do
Right.
make myself available, and actually do a whole lot more than just some of the things that we talked about. Like when stuff comes up, like for example, with COVID,
Uh huh.
one client I had, he wasn't ready to do anything remote. So, all this stuff happened like within 24 hours, 48 for Michigan. And he decided that he was going to let some of his people start to work from home, didn't really have the right equipment. We started
Mm,
working on that. I put together a work from home letter in terms of, some of these people really had never worked from home. So you got
right.
to set expectations right now. And then I said, we need to have daily huddles. You are not going to be able to manage these people unless we have a daily touch point that'll make them feel comfortable and make you
Right.
feel comfortable. So, I mean, you have to be flexible for whatever additional thing comes in. And that could be a big sale. We might have to like put some of our normal week to week practices um, aside for a while we dig down or deep and go get, a major sale. So it's flexibility. I think once, I've never had anybody say this just isn't working for us
Right.
once we engage.
Right. 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 Because the only thing is, what if the business owner is asking that question? How can this work full time before the engagement? Like you're just having a conversation at that point.
Yeah. So I guess, with technology tools, it's not like it's really remote. I mean, you and I are doing this right now.
Yeah. Well, post
And
COVID, like you pointed out, I mean, post COVID, it gets easier to
right,
people get their head around it more easily because they were forced for 3 months to work remotely with everybody, even if until then, 100% of their people were in person. So now everybody's a little bit more exposed to it, and it's a little less foreign than it used to be.
right. I think it doesn't, as long as you have the plan and there's prescription around, this is the cadence. We meet on Tuesdays. I meet with your team either virtually or, remotely from 10 to 2 on Tuesdays or whatever it is. And that's what we do every week. I'm yours for that amount of time. I'm also yours for a certain amount of other time, assuming that I, can get to you in the, for those emergencies or whatever. But once you get that cadence down, it's just like
Right.
I am an extension.
Right.
And that extension can be for multiple years, or it can be very finite. I had one client who was a stage 2 client on the smaller side and really just wanted some
Can you explain to people what stage 2 means?
Oh, sure. Stage 2 is an established company in the maturity life cycle. So startup, stage 2, and then end of your term, which would usually be sell, right?
Okay.
Um, so stage 2 in business for, I think, 15 years, just really wanted guidance, and not in terms of his team, but in terms of himself, because he was still selling. So we agreed on a 6-month program.
Okay.
And from there, he received the type of framework and sales coaching that he needed to go back to his team and implement with himself.
Okay.
So a little bit of a different spin.
Yeah, different spin on it. And with that, I guess that takes us perfectly to the last little thing in our last few minutes I wanted to ask you about, which is what do these engagements typically look like? Like how much time, how much money, or like ranges of these things. Like what are the typical ways that things like this work?
Yeah, so it usually is, number one, scoped out. I don't like to do anything without a scope. I want everybody to be in agreement with what
Yeah.
are the pain points, what are we solving, and here's my estimation of what that is going to look like. So once
Right.
we determine the scope size, it
Mm-hmm.
falls into a couple of different categories typically. It can be 1 to 2 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And these are typicals. There's opportunity for more custom settings, but 1 to 2 hours a week to 1 or 2 days a week. 1 or 2 days a
And
week
let's say
is,
1 or 2 hours a week. What does that entail? Is that just leading the sales meeting, or like what is that?
yeah. So that again would be for maybe 1 or 2 people, and not a whole sales team. That could be the sales team, and that
Right.
1 or 2 hours would be reviewing the numbers against the goals, activity. What are we doing? What worked last week? What's working? What do you got planned for this week? What are we doing with the marketing? So there's always this integrated approach to what's the
Mm-hmm.
marketing plan? How are we in? If you don't have a marketing plan, a real marketing department, then we have to figure one out for you, because here's the deal. Can't have the Solomon baby thing going on anymore with human resources like salespeople. A lot of business owners think that you can just do lead gen, lead nurture, and close. Our brains don't work that way. You can't cut us up and slice us that way. I know that's not a really nice analogy. I should get rid of that, right? But Solomon actually didn't do that, so we're okay. So that's not how we operate. So you got to figure, and this goes back to the technology, and a lot of business owners don't understand it. It's why your technology, your website is so important. You have to have some digital. You got to have some tech tools. You can't afford to spend $1 gazillion over here on a maybe sales resource. You really should have lower cost technology running that lead gen, lead nurture. Then you better have the right kind of salesperson to catch that and do something with it. If they're not closing 70% of what you're producing over here, you got to get rid of them or put them in a different seat. So back to your point, what are you doing for 1 or 2 hours? Sorry. I'm taking care of those I'll say 2 to 3 salespeople.
Okay.
And we're coaching, we're making sure they're focused on the right things and getting the right kind of results. If we go into a half-day session, we got a few more salespeople, we got more operational people, we've got marketing initiatives, and that first piece over here, that can be like, let's just say $1,000. Let's just say where it starts, and it's 2 hours a week. Again, that's just a range or starting point. Half day jumps up to maybe like 2,500. Full day, you double that, you figured it out. So those are
I
kind
went
of
to law school because I'm not good at math, but that I could do. But right, makes sense. And what about day or two a week? Like, what is that? Not the money part, but what does that look like in terms of your involvement?
So that would really be a team of like 7, 8, or 9 people, where it's
Mm-hmm.
consuming, a full day of sales coaching and or on-site sales calls. So when we're and it's on-site sales calls is fine anytime too. I do those all the time with people. We just have
Like
to
a
fit
ride
it.
along where you
Yep,
go you mean to meet a
yep,
client? Yeah.
right. Or sales
Or a
prep.
potential client.
Yeah. Prospect, yep. And then the other part of it is always either working with or developing marketing plans and making sure we're in alignment with the back end, which is the finance or operational part. We can't forget that sales is inclusive of acquisition and retention. And if we're not paying attention to the retention part of it, which sometimes gets dumped into customer service, which falls under finance or operations, that's a problem. If we're losing all this over here because customer service isn't right, then we have a problem. It should really be an extension, an integrated process along the whole continuum of marketing, sales, ops, finance, and it's all those touch points in between: lead gen, lead nurture, acquire, retain, and customer service. So that's the goal along the whole way with all of the different people that I integrate and communicate with.
Right. Well, it's extremely helpful. Again, I definitely encourage anybody out there to follow Teresa Renaud, and Renaud is spelled Renaud. Follow Teresa Renaud on LinkedIn. I mean, again, you want to be following her also, so you could catch up with her channel, Fractional Service Insights, or interviews. You get to see me, but you'll also get to see a lot of other great people. And you can again check out Teresa's website at salesmanagementservice.com, or follow her on LinkedIn, Teresa Renaud, Renaud. So definitely want to find out more about what she does, or what fractional sales management means, or what it does, or if you want to have a conversation with her, potentially for your own business, obviously you can reach out to her in one of those methods. But really appreciate you coming on the show and explaining more about this concept, which I think is kind of novel to some people. So I think it's a good tool for people to know about.
Ben, thank you so much. It was really enjoyable. I'm glad we had a chance to do last week's session and then this week. Looking forward to staying in touch. This is awesome.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. And we'll see everybody else on the other side. Thanks so much. Bye.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.